everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. I'm excited this week to welcome Steve Milo to the show, who is from VTrips. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Bart.
How is it going over there? Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you live, and tell me a little bit more about VTrips.
Yes, I'm the founder CEO of VTrips. In case those in Australia haven't heard of us, we've got about 7,000 properties we manage in the United States, primarily in the southeast region of the country. And these are all exclusive contracts. And we're based out of Ponte Vedra, Florida, which is a suburb of Jacksonville, Florida. So for those who are not familiar with Jacksonville, Florida, it's on the East Coast, really very far north. So we're not in Miami, we're not in Orlando. We're up in Jacksonville, actually really close to the beach. Generally it's sunny and very warm here. And, we kind of have a real central position as we have about 3,000 of our properties in the state of Florida. And in the U.S., Florida is the largest state for vacation rentals. About 22% of the inventory is in Florida. But we're also in some areas like Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, so all the southeast region. And we have about 1,000 employees, and we've mainly grown over the last couple of years through merger and acquisitions.
Yeah. And so, look, I mean, I've got so many different questions, and I think some people will know the answers, but for those that don't, I'm super interested, like that decision to focus on the one territory or the one area. Is that, I assume that's super conscious. What was the strategy behind the growth?
Well, originally the strategy for growth was fairly opportunistic. Back when I started the business in 2006, I grew organically initially, and then the recession here hit some of the smaller companies pretty hard. And I started to do merger and acquisition just in our region. And I bought 4 companies within a 4-year span. Starting in 2014, though, I started to look at M&A as a way to really diversify our risk. We were starting to face some regulations in the state of Florida. And I started to see that it was possible to take what we had learned at VTrips in the state of Florida and apply it across other areas we went into. And so we began on this merger and acquisition path, and we've done about 30 mergers and acquisitions over the past couple of years.
Yeah, right. So that's only accelerating.
Yeah, definitely. We've done a good job because we're profitable. We've never been unprofitable. And so that's allowed us to kind of build up credibility with banks. So the primary way we've been able to fund merger and acquisition has been through bank and now private debt facilities. And you have to be profitable to do that. But if you are, it's the best way of doing it in terms of you don't have to give up a lot of equity or any equity, really, the way we've structured it to build the debt.
Yeah, amazing. And look, so for today's episode, there's a few things I want to cover, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. I've been excited about it all week, and I wanted to talk to you today about sort of the landscape that we're in and how to build a short-term rental business from 2 perspectives. One, if you're small and you're trying to grow it, and then the other perspective would be the kind of the end game. Like, when does Steve say, "Hey, this is a great company"? What makes a great company to acquire? But before I do, Steve, I'm super curious. So, in 2006, the landscape, short-term rentals as they are wouldn't have been even called short-term rentals. I guess it would have been vacation rentals. I'm guessing Airbnb wouldn't be the main distribution channel. So you were into this game very early, and you've seen a lot of change. Can you tell us a bit about sort of those early years?
Yes, sure. So I think I got in right as hosted systems were starting, which meant from a technology standpoint, you didn't have to do network I was early on getting onto hosted systems with a group called Escapio, which eventually was purchased by HomeAway Software. But back then, distribution was really like a classified, like Craigslist. You had companies like VRBO and Great Rentals and vacationrentals.com, et cetera, et cetera. And you would, if you were a consumer, you would literally email or call the property manager, and then the property manager would try to book it over the phone or book it through email. That was a very, very inefficient system, and Airbnb didn't really start until about 2009, and they're the ones who took this industry transactional. So I was kind of in early before it truly became transactional. I remember 2014 was when we started to actually do transactional with OTAs. Prior to that, we had a website. The website was transactional, but all the OTAs were coming from this very, very inefficient classified listing type situation, which meant you had to have a pretty large call center to manage all the volume.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, okay. And then, so in terms of the real growth of VTrips and that I guess transition where you started to acquire companies, when did the vision really kind of cement itself for you? Because obviously the industry's changing, the way that you'd be engaging with homeowners as well would start to change with time, and people would see it as, you know, not just a holiday home or something, they'd see it as an investment opportunity. What was, I mean, you tell me, like, what was that sort of that transition? Where was the point where you did start to acquire and really have the vision that that has led you to where you are today?
I'd say this really around 2014, 2015. We were having extraordinarily success with distribution. So we were really early with integration of VRBO to direct booking. Early on, we were getting Airbnb. So we were really outpacing our competition. And I believe that with our ability to kind of leverage hosted system and the fact that we were leveraging technology, we had a competitive advantage. And there is definitely, you gain cost synergies as you grow. So you're going to gain synergies on accounting, marketing, IT, reservations, even the reservation staff. And so if you could manage this, you could scale and do it in a way that was profitable. And that's really what I saw. I was able to convince a bank to lend me $10 million to do some additional merger and acquisition. And that was really where it all started. Was I was able to convince banks to lend me money based on our profitability at, a ratio. At that point, it was about three times our profit that we were able to borrow. But, that allowed me to start to really expand into other areas.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So, and you're saying that was that 2014-15 mark where where that change happened. And I take it from a lot of the larger companies that I talk to, it's it's all centered around the P&L and really understanding that and being able to go and raise that capital and that money. When did you kind of figure out that your P&L is going to be the massive driver for this particular business?
Well, we had talked to some advisors early on, and they definitely said because we were profitable, we had the access to capital. I really think what happened in between 2016 and 2019 was very interesting. We were expanding, but nowhere near as fast as some of these other companies like Turnkey and Vacasa, who were getting basically venture funding, and they were getting venture funding based on a multiple of revenue. They didn't have to be profitable. And so, they were greatly outpacing VTrips at that point. And so it's really been an interesting kind of pivot. And I think in some cases we forget how many companies that were out there who are no longer even with us, like Stay Alfred or Lyric or Domio, and some of the other companies like Wanderjohn and some that may not be here for much longer, who were not based on profits. So the companies you're talking to today are the ones who actually stuck kind of to their principles and said, we're going to run this business the way we think it should be run, which is based on profitability, which, by the way, is how the the hotel companies are based, right? So the hospitality industry, Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, they are all valued. Their stocks are valued based on a multiple of their EBITDA, and that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so, that's how the hospitality industry has been valued for, 30, 40 years. And, the companies that have kind of been very, very profitable and stuck to profitability have been the ones that are surviving this kind of disruption, right? Disruption created first by COVID, and now disruption created by inflation and, in the U.S. at least, a recession.
Yeah. Look, in my mind, the path that I want to take that I'm super interested in is actually that venture capital path, and talking about you're giving up equity to get the money, and then you're working on different multiples, like you said, on revenue rather than profitability, like a lot of big tech companies out there. So it's kind of a rabbit hole which I'd love to scratch at, but I don't think I'm going to do that today. The reason being is I think that you might have some tips for our audience that might help more than that part. I think that you're absolutely right, like in terms of what you've been saying about profitability. So I'll put that one in the bank for later.
Well, I will say this. The private equity route is one that is fraught with a lot of risk. I know that there's movies like The Social Network, which is the evolution of Facebook, that make it sound exciting and fun to go get into bed with venture capitalists. Having been involved with them in a past life and seeing kind of the grimy underbelly of them, I was very, very prudent to say that is not what we want to do early on. We're going to be based on profitability, and if we ever do take money, it will be based on working with private equity, in particular, family funds who are aligned with that vision. So those are growth funds. They're not, the typical venture capital that you hear about. Growth funds are very, very different, and they have, they're looking for companies that are profitable. And believe me, the amount of investors now that have changed their tune is enormous, because right now the capital markets are not going to allow you to invest in companies that are losing vast sums of money. They have to be profitable. And so it is very, very interesting what's happened. And you're right, it's a complex area, because things have kind of pivoted so fast. But we did take in a round of private equity almost a year and a half ago. And it's it created kind of a supercharge for us, where we were able to then get a lot more debt. But it was with a family fund. It was growth capital. We were very, very careful to negotiate our letter of intent very carefully to make sure governance and things like that were addressed right at the beginning. And so we took that to be able to accelerate our growth. But too many CEOs and their boards take capital at the wrong point, and they take it for the wrong reasons, and that's really can get you into trouble. And we're seeing companies that have taken capital that now are in deep trouble, founders going, and some of the consequences. I guess the crypto market's another tale of woe right now. But this is the beginning stages of a reset that's going to go across every single industry, where these companies that were based on revenue only, grow customers at all costs, a lot of them are going to have trouble surviving.
Yeah. Look, I don't disagree for a second, especially with everything that's happening sort of in the economy right now. It's a very deep topic. We could go on for quite a while. And as you said, that things have changed, and it's kind of nice to hear as well that sort of that journey through profitability. I've heard many CEOs say, "Oh, once we get X amount of dollars, everything's going to be fine. It's going to solve all of our problems." And I remember just kind of looking at them going, "Oh my God, no! Your problems you need to fix your problems to get the capital, not the other way around."
Well, there's also a culture, right? So again, I probably have had close to 50 term sheets from private equity. So I turned down 49 of them before I accepted one. And I talked to a lot of private equity companies, and I just think in many cases their mindset was just so screwed up, where they wanted early on they thought I was too conservative because I was not growing fast enough. Mm-hmm. And I think, I stuck to my guns and I made a decision at that point. I'm going to do it my way. I may not necessarily win the race based on what I was seeing with some of these other companies getting massive amounts of capital, but I'm not going to veer off the cliff. And that also means as a CEO, you build your company, your management team, your C team around your vision. And my vision was a culture of profitability. And that means every single person that I brought into leadership is focused in on profitability. And that means variance reporting, budgets, taking a look at the cost of goods sold, taking a look at, just mundane things like, cleaning supplies, laundry costs, all of the things that create, cost, and then even on the sales and marketing side. But when you build a team like that and you build a culture like that, it allows you to then handle capital in a responsible way. I think it's going to be very, very hard for companies that weren't built with a culture of profitability to suddenly become profitable. I think it's just so different. And I've met some of these firms who are revenue only, and my guess is, because I've seen the writing on the wall from the PE firms, they're ruthless. They get that way for a reason. The first thing they do is they bring in a chief financial officer from outside, and soon enough, the founders are gone. And the reason why the founders are gone is they don't know how to operate a profitable company. All they've learned is how to grow at all costs. They do not have the financial discipline to run a company during a recession, which is what we're in. And, who knows how long we'll be in this recession. But, the markets are certainly betting that it could be a while.
Yeah. Good. Look, I'm going to wrap that one up, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I think that you kind of let us in a little bit. I don't know if you did that deliberately or inadvertently around vision and goals and that sort of thing. A lot of our audience most of our audience won't be at the scale that you're at. But I think that you'd have some great tips to give people that are trying to scale, that are trying to go, that are going through different stages of their business. And maybe, I don't know whether we start off at the end and then go backwards, or whether we start off at the start and then go forwards. But I think maybe a good starting point would be talking about vision and goals and building a properly managed business. Because one of the things that I get a lot is, a lot of people will just get into the business. They'll start off with 1 or 2 short-term rentals, then they'll build to 5 and 10 and so on and so forth. But they haven't thought about exit. They haven't thought about what the business is actually worth. Where do you think we should start, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you start with, what do you want? So I think it's impossible to give someone advice until you find out, what do you want? So what is your goal in terms of entering this space? Is it to have a business that basically provides for your family, provides your ability to, have nice things like houses and good schools for your kids, those type of things? Or are you really geared to want to take, additional risk? And how much time, effort, hassles, headaches do you want? And do you even have the skill sets? Do you have the skill sets to manage people and to manage remote offices? And these are things that you really have to ask people, and everybody's in a different point of their life. But I think if you ask them first, what do you want? Then it's easier to start to figure out, well, what's the right plan? Because there's been a lot of discussion why some companies have been able to scale and some haven't, and what is that leadership and what is the makeup? And I've talked to many, many, many successful people. They don't want to get too big. And there is nothing wrong with just kind of staying in your area, taking the money you make, buying investment real estate, and just being very, very successful in your community. So again, I mean, this is not trying to say, hey, scale. This is me first saying, what do you want? Once you figure out what you want, and if it is, and there's certainly people I talk to that say, well, I want to get to 500 properties and then I want to sell. I think the question is first, before arbitrarily coming up with a number, first try to figure out, well, what's the money that you want? Is it enough money to retire? What's that number? And let's back into it, because you may get there by having a company with 200 luxury properties than just 500 properties scattered all over the place. And you may actually get there faster, and it may just be much more sane. So think about what you want first.
Yeah, and one of the things that is really striking about what you said is, quite often if you ask someone what they want, the response is, a lot, a lot, and it's very hard to actually quantify what that number is, whether it's 1 million, 5 million, 2 houses, 10 houses, holiday homes all over the world, traveling in a jet or not in a jet. But one thing that you said, which is, what kind of lifestyle do you want? What is important to you in terms of your family, your friends, and your stress levels and that sort of thing, all around lifestyle. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think it's all interrelated, right? So when you ask people what they want and they say, well, I want to make $10 million and that's how much I need to retire. And so, okay, well, that's a fairly reasonable goal. It's not an unattainable goal. But then the next question is, in order to do that, you're going to need a company, give or take, that makes $2 million a year in EBITDA. And so, first, do you have a budget? Are you good with accounting? Do you know how financial statements work? And when I ask people in these panels or these conferences to raise their hand if they're actually even doing a budget, it's less than 5% of the people. And at that point, I would go back to people and say, okay, are you willing to run a company in a financially disciplined way? Are you willing to make the commitment either to learn accounting or to hire, an accountant for your company? And are you willing to start to work on a business plan? Because again, you can operate profitably. A lot of people I meet are husband and wives or even just sole proprietor without having a lot of overhead and management. When you start to layer on that management, that's where you get into trouble. So again, these questions have to do somewhat with personality and profile, and some people are raising children and, they don't want to take all this risk. And so I can spend 20 minutes with someone and just really kind of push back and just really ask them, what are you trying to do here? And sometimes it's effective because they haven't really thought through what they're trying to do. And then there's another group of people who they just, up until recently, they thought they could just, go out and, get 200 properties and it would be easy. And it's not easy. Again, this as you grow, it gets harder and harder. And there's a lot of reasons why it gets harder, but you should never underestimate how difficult it is to scale a business unless you really are disciplined.
And let's talk about that. So the beauty of short-term rentals is the barrier to entry is negligible. You can probably watch some YouTube videos, make a few phone calls, get some contracts together, and you can have a business, right? So it's not like a lot of other businesses where you need capital to actually put into it to get going. Here you can do it with time and some education rather than actually needing lots of money just to get going, right? So then we get to a certain stage and we're now growing the business. We're up to 10 properties. That sort of transition between, all right, I've just got some stuff going on, to now I want to start to make this into a business. What does it take? What do we have to start to think about? Obviously, we're upskilling ourselves as we go, but then we're going to have to start hiring people and starting to change things up. What advice would you give to someone that's sort of at that like tiny scale?
Well, the advice I would give them is there are things that you have to do that are hard, but you need to do them early on, because the earlier you do them, the less hard they will be. So one of the first lessons I've given people if they want to scale is really to think through their property management system. You're going to want a system that scales, and too many people make the decision to get something that looks easy or maybe is cheap, and then they get into a bind because it doesn't have the ability to scale. And that scale is really, in many cases, the accounting piece, which takes more enterprise level software to obtain. But also the distribution piece. Does it truly have the ability to distribute? Can you run work orders? Can you run housekeeping? Can you manage a business of scale through that property management system? And too many people are just kind of not, disciplined. They don't do a request for proposal. They don't look at all the alternatives. They don't ask people that are larger companies for recommendations. They tend to, be kind of swayed by salespeople, which is really the worst way you should make a decision. So, it starts right there, and there's many companies that have made foolish mistakes where they get a property management system and it's not scalable. And they find that out in a hurry once they get to a certain level of properties where things start to break pretty bad, and you can't just throw bodies at it. So that's the first thing. The second thing really is the financial discipline. If you truly are going to grow, are you running financial statements? Are you running variance reports? Because you can't just throw bodies at things and just expect there to be money to pay for those salaries. You've got to run financial statements and run a budget report, a variance report every single month, and make sure you're scaling and running against it. Those are really kind of the two core issues: accounting and property management system. All the other stuff kind of falls underneath that. I mean, I talked to one person in England who was at a conference. Someone put me on a conference with this guy who had 200 properties in London, and he had no website. And I was shocked. And he said he didn't need a website because Airbnb was his website. Well, if that's something you believe in, you should stick to 5 properties, because if you're not willing to create your own website and to build email lists and capture your customer contact information, you should not manage any other person's properties other than your own, because you're going to have major problems staying around. And that person found out the hard way when, during the pandemic, Airbnb, changed their extenuating circumstance policy, and they were gone. Business with quote unquote 200 properties was gone because they built their business on one distribution channel. Those are some of the people that when I hear them and they start talking how smart they are, sometimes I get a reputation of being a little brash because I say things like, you're not going to be around. And I said right at that panel, you are playing Russian roulette and there's 5 bullets in the chamber. So, you don't have your own website. That's inexcusable at this point. If you want to scale, not to have your own website. And if you're not willing to do that, then stop, trying to scale. Just manage the properties you have and be done with it. But it's not difficult to create your own website. It's just part of the things that you're going to need to do if you are going to scale and, grow to any size.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we build websites, Steve, so this is like magic. And I'm not paying Steve for this. So, no, I appreciate that. And I think that there's a bigger topic there about sort of what this business actually is. Like that it is a hospitality business, that we are providing experiences for customers and we want to engage our customers in a certain way. And that's why at the start I actually asked you, why did you choose to go to a certain area? Was it because of, your cleaners and all that kind of stuff and, building into that customer experience? But before I if we have time, I'll go back there. But I do want to ask you, so we've talked about building the right systems, having the right fundamentals in terms of accounting and understanding your numbers. And then you said that the people side of it, I think, is probably one of the parts that a lot of companies struggle with, because once you get to a certain size in terms of properties, you hire someone, but then they just they smash your profitability because you're not making any money anymore. And then each time you get to, between 50 to 100, you got to hire more people because you've got more problems. And I'm positive that VTrips has similar experiences where you're getting to a certain size and then you're having to hire and hire to make up for it. So what advice would you give to someone that's on the smaller side and looking at their team and their growth from 2 points of view? One, from, what are those first hires, and do you have an idea? And the other one, if we're trying to sell the business later on, what is it that Steve's looking for?
Well, I would say, and it's kind of cute and clever, but you're going to kind of have a step of cost you're going to have to take on at 50, 500, and 5,000 properties. And what I mean by that is, once you get to 50 properties, it's probably not possible to manage those properties by yourself. And so you're going to start to take on overhead just to run a small business over 50. You're going to have people who can help you. So people who can help, manage the booking process, back-end administration, owner statements, picking up the phone if you're still taking calls, texting people back, setting up registration for Airbnb, getting marketing, website support. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and at 50 properties, give or take, depending on the type of properties you have, homes are much more labor intensive than condos, et cetera. You're gonna need people to help you, and so you're going to expend money to hire those people, and you're going to start to see a return on that investment once you hit 100 plus properties. So there's going to be an area where from 50 to 100, you're not really seeing any additional money. It may actually be costing you money, but those people are going to help you get to a certain level of scale that you wouldn't have if you hadn't hired them. Then give or take around 500 properties. And again, it depends on the type of properties you manage. Houses definitely are more intensive than condos. You're going to need to build a middle management team. And that means you're going to have an accounting manager, a reservation agent manager, a marketing manager. You're going to have to put in a level of management between you and the people you've hired. And it's going to be painful because those people are expensive, and there's a lot of competition for competent managers, and you're going to have to do a lot to recruit and hire and bring them in and start to train them on your culture. And again, I mean, that's a big expense. So you may be better off if you're quote unquote trying to sell your business, sell it at 300 rather than pick up all this middle management that's going to start to eat up your profitability at that 500 range. And then, and very few companies go beyond this range where they get beyond 1,000 or 2,000 properties. But, where we're at, 5,000 plus, we've had to hire a whole C team. So a chief financial officer, a chief operating officer, a chief strategy officer, CFO, et cetera. Chief financial officer is really super critical to raising money. That is just a huge level of compensation. And, if you're trying to figure out what positions cost, I mean, there's salary calculator out there, and they'll give you ranges of what a CFO costs or a COO or, those different heavy salary pieces, but you're going to need them if you're going to scale an enterprise business. And again, it may be better off to sell before you take on all of that overhead.
Yeah. And you've led me to I guess where we're going to go. And by the way, that answer to me was probably one of the best that I've heard for a long time in terms of those inflection points where you basically said you're gonna suffer, but the payoff is once you get to the biggest stage. And all of this leads back to the budget and the numbers, which you talked about before. And you said a lot of people don't have them, so as long as you've got that sorted out, you're going to be okay.
Well, I mean, that's what you should be looking at. And, fortunately, I'm very good with numbers. I'm very good with financial statements. I'm the one who ran the financial statements early on for the company and created the budget and the operating budget for really the first 12 plus years of the company. So I can read variance reports, I can read balance sheets, and I started talking to my executive team back in April, May, that we were going to have to start to really take a look at cost containment because I started to see a slowdown in the United States and our markets on occupancy, and then also clearly there was inflation, and there was a discussion of interest rate hikes, and so we started early on to prepare for 2023 and being a different reality, and that means we tightened our belt. We did RFPs to our vendors. We really kind of pitted them and leveraged them against each other. Some of the seasonal workforce, we made sure that we let go of them early and we didn't try to carry them through season, which might be something you have to do if you're in a labor tight situation. But, I made the call, we're not going to carry seasonal cleaners and seasonal inspectors through the off season. We're going to let them go like we have, traditionally, and we'll count on the fact that once we get to March, we'll start hiring again to gear up for the summer. That's how we used to run things, and the labor market got so tight in the United States. We carried a lot of people in 2021. Also, 2021 was a super occupancy year, but 2022 was not as strong as 2021. And so you've got to just start to tighten the belt and make decisions and drive, cost. And all we've been talking about is 2023 and really maximizing profitability in 2023. And that's really something, again, if you're going to take bank debt, if you're going to have investors, you've got to be willing to make those hard decisions. And if you're not, don't do it.
Beauty. And then just I think to wrap us up, I would love to know your thoughts about how to create the best value in a short-term rental property management business for Steve to be fighting for that particular business with competitors saying, hey, this is really good, I really want it, it's worth it. You might say, hey, you know what, it doesn't matter what the business size is, but there is opportunity. Where do people go? How should people be thinking from the outset to really find a nice exit if that's what they want?
Well, the companies we're looking at, and we're looking to do a lot of acquisition in 2023, are companies that have profit and at least 3 years of profitability, and they have financial statements, and then we can verify it with tax returns. The average company we're looking at in terms of profitability is $3 million. So, we're looking at some that are much higher than that and some that are a little lower than that. But, those companies, in general, they've had principals or partners, at least one of them has been willing to put in the time and the effort to make sure that they're profitable and to document their profitability. And so the companies we're looking at have done that, and we're asked, we definitely want full 2022 year, not just 2021. And so, being profitable is critical for us. We can't touch a company that's not profitable.
Got it. And $3 million would be roughly how many homes?
Well,
how many doors? It depends on the market, right?
It depends on the market. We've seen some companies with about 150 properties be about 3 million. We've seen some with 400 properties be at 3 million. A lot of it has to do, again, we just kind of went through that. If you've been smart and you're in luxury and high revenue properties and you keep a lean staff, you could potentially throw $3 million. So many companies we've looked at, though, where they've had profitability challenges is, they've been bloated with staff. or in some cases, they had properties that really aren't really performing and they don't even pay attention to them. Like I said, the numbers game is really the worst thing for this industry. It shouldn't be about how many units you have. It should be revenue per unit, and that's all you should be looking at. And if you're carrying properties where there's just not a lot of revenue per that property, you're doing yourself and your staff a disservice. My guess is you're probably losing money on those.
Yeah, got it. Look, I think that's there's so many topics for another episode. I think the profitability piece and talking about the bits of what you can do to be more profitable will be invaluable to everyone. But I'm conscious of our time running out. Are there any final thoughts of the day?
Well, we talk about this myth of an easy exit. There's not going to be a myth of an easy exit for people out there. If you really want to do this, then put in the time, put in the effort to, create financials right away. And that should be the first order of business. And then take a look at some of the hosted systems you have and make sure that they're scalable. But there's no reason, even if you just have 10 properties, you shouldn't be running financial statements. It's really inexcusable, and it's just, in many cases, it's laziness. It's just a lazy way to be about business, and you're never going to be able to get to where you need to go if you're not willing to put the discipline in to run profit and loss statements and to do it on a monthly basis and to have an operating budget and to kind of take a look at how you're faring versus that operating budget. This is how you drive success. And if you're unwilling to do that, then you're going to really shortchange yourself, and it's going to definitely hinder your ability to be successful.
And make sure that you pay yourself a wage as well, right?
Well, yeah, that goes without saying.
Steve, thank you so much for one. We barely know each other. We met almost a month ago in Vegas, and you've been incredibly amiable with every conversation I've had with you to try to contribute, give back to the industry, and to grow it. So it's incredibly clear to me where your motivations lie, and it is to help people out. The rest will kind of look after itself, and I think philosophically we're quite well aligned. So thanks for sharing your time, your experience, and your knowledge with everyone. I know that with Astra, hopefully we'll get you in to have some chats about regulation and that sort of thing. And look, I hope that we can reconnect. And I know that you're doing a million and one different projects, and I'd love to share that journey with you.
All right. Well, thanks, Bart.
I really appreciate it. Once again, take care and have a good rest of the day.
All right.